everyone. This is Chris from Punk and Paisley, and I felt compelled to do a reintroduction video to my channel. There are two components of what I'm going to do in this short video. One is reintroduce myself and the content of the channel so that you can decide if this is something you'd like to subscribe to or not. It is, of course, free to subscribe. It helps me out, helps you out in finding the videos in future if that's something that you like. And the other is as a sort of cautionary tale for other YouTubers as to what not to do. Learn from my mistake, hopefully, and be better prepared with your channel. Now, who am I and what is the channel? Well, my name's Chris. I'm in my 50s. I became a teenager in the 1980s. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA, and I grew up a hardcore and punk kid, and that's my first love. So I love the 80s hardcore and thrash and punk rock, and I love 70s punk rock. And then I started asking myself, where did that all come from? And I really fell into a big hole of 60s garage, 60s and 70s psychedelia, krautrock. I came to appreciate blues and R&B and early rock and roll and some areas of jazz. A lot of that we won't get into so much on this channel, I don't think. But what we will be talking about in great detail with an eye toward what you might like to add to your record collection as I do these reviews of my large and growing record collection would be looking at punk rock, hardcore, thrash and its offshoots and the weird little bands like Butthole Surfers and bands that are a whole lot more obscure than Butthole Surfers that were sort of branches out of all of that and related to it. I'm going to talk about the zines and zine culture that came with that. I brought a lot of my zines with me. I have quite the collection. I've been collecting these things 40 years. Perhaps you can profit from some of my experience and taste in these areas. Going to be talking about 60s garage rock and psychedelia and all of the compilations in the 80s and 90s into the 2000s. I was buying as many as I could of all of the great, largely bootleg compilations that came out, the series that were looking at Killed by Death Punk, 60s garage, 60s psychedelia, into the 70s, all of that great stuff that came out. Some of those records themselves are now a little bit on the rare side, so we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about surf. We're going to talk about anything that really rocks. Sometimes I might veer a little bit into classic rock. As I grew a bit older, my taste deepened and changed. I started asking the question, well, where does this come from? Well, where does that come from? So that led me back in time. We're looking at the years primarily about 1965 through the early 1990s in terms of when the music was originally recorded. And that's going to be my focus, and that's the purpose of the channel. I'm probably going to keep doing this whether or not anybody enjoys it. So even if just for my own edification, it's a cool thing for me to do. I mentioned transitioning into the second part of the video that we moved. I got recognized as an Italian citizen through my great grandfather. Believe it or not, I am but a quarter Italian, but in the eyes of the Italian government, I'm 100% Italian and have been since birth. This came as quite a shock to my wife and I about 5 years ago. And we decided to do something about it pronto. And I'm glad that we did. I got myself recognized as fast as possible because it turns out that just a couple of months ago, the Italian government pretty radically reordered the way that it does citizenship by descent. I would not have qualified under the new rules. So I'm glad that we were already living here for about a year permanently. And it was about 5 years after that, after I was recognized that change was made. So I'm fine. And my wife's fine to be in the country legally, and we own a house here, and we moved here, and we packed a 40-foot container with all of our worldly possessions, which, as my wife would remind me, was mostly my possessions. Massive numbers of big LP boxes of my thousands of LPs, maybe a couple thousand 45s and 7-inch EPs. And all my CDs, there were probably 1,000 of those. And we even brought a few hundred cassettes and maybe a couple of 8-tracks. I also brought my book collection That was another big part of the 40-foot container. And all my zines, man, you can't leave most of the run of Maximum Rock and Roll 1 through 100, or number 0 technically through 100 at home. You can't do that. That was coming with me, along with a lot of my other zines, my Ugly Things, and some of my 80s zines, and my Fact Sheet 5s, and my Flip Sides, all that cool stuff. So I'd like to revisit my collection and go through a lot of it with you. One of the things that I was forced to do in the move was really make records sort of sing for their supper. I've seen 1 or 2 episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race in my life, but I know that there's that competition at the end, the lip sync for your life. I was playing some records where I was telling my wife, this record's lip syncing for its life. We have to decide if I sell it off in the U.S. or if it comes with me. Now, I was also selling records for a living. I was selling books and records online for a living for about the 15 or 16 years before we moved. And we've been here for years. So for a solid 15 or 16 years, my primary source of income was selling records and books online. A lot of that was soul 45s, like Northern Soul type 45s. A lot of that was jazz records. Some of it was rock, some was pop, and even classical and that sort of thing. Basically, whatever I could get my hands on that I knew I had value and I could flip. And we're in areas that, although I appreciate those forms of music, they're not my core interest. So it didn't hurt quite as much to sell them off. A few things did hurt a little, but when you're making a living selling records and books, you make this compromise. I had filled something like 50,000 orders on Amazon, just under 500 on eBay through the years. I filled about a bit under 4,000 Discogs orders for between 1 and let's say 12 records each. So I sold probably about 8,000 individual records on Discogs. That account's pretty much dead because it's attached to my American bank account, my American address, and all that good stuff. This is going somewhere. So I do have an Italian Discogs account now. I only brought a couple hundred records with me to sell. I've only had about 30 sales so far, 31 or 32 sales on my new Discogs account here in Italy. They're almost all within the EU because of the cost of postage and the general hassle of doing customs, which may be another. The selling of records, buying and selling records might be something else that I get into on the channel sometimes because I do know that from the inside. The first record I ever sold, not thinking of myself as doing it for a living, but just to flip it. I think it was on eBay in 1997 when you would still get a check or actually cash in the mail. You'd have to wait for that to come and clear or just see that you had the cash. But this was before PayPal. That's how old I am and how long I've been doing this. But I didn't really get into doing sales online full time until about 2005, after I lost my last office job in a series of long office jobs, and just started doing that for a living for almost 20 years. So actually, yeah, so it was longer than 16 or 17 years. It was closer to 18 or 19 years that I was making a living flipping books and records online. So I've spent 40 years in record stores. I've spent about 35 years looking at records in thrift stores and all that good stuff. And I figured I'd start a channel a couple of months ago. I decided to start a channel to share some of that and do exactly what I just described. I mentioned that I moved from the United States to here in Italy. When I did so, I did port one of my 2 phone numbers. I had kind of a business phone, cell phone number, and a personal cell phone number, and I ported the personal cell phone number, and the one that was more kind of business, I didn't port. I just let it die, stopped paying the bill. It's somebody else's phone number now. That, as it turns out, was the Google account that I was signed into on the laptop that I brought with me from the US to Italy and had been using I had been using for about 10 or 11 months in Italy at that point. So different IP address, different phone number. My current Google account that this channel is associated with my current phone, which is associated with both my old US phone number, which I ported paying Google, ironically or appropriately, I guess, and also my new Italian phone number. It's associated with both. I get messages from both. For $20, you can port your number and your US number abroad, and it stays with you, and you have access to phone calls, and you have, as long as you pay Google for the phone call, and you have access to text messages, which keeps a lot of subscriptions alive for things that require two-factor authentication. Well, my YouTube that I was signed into just as a viewer, just as a consumer of YouTube, I did two-factor authentication, I suppose, to sign into that on the laptop when I bought the laptop in about 2022. In fact, it was 2022. So I had been signed in there for 3 years, about maybe a little less than 3 years before I started the channel. Didn't change that when I moved. And I was able to start a channel. I was recognized as the owner of the channel. I was able to post content. I was able to agree to do all sorts of things. Thinking, this won't be a problem. And I saw that there was the ability to change the ownership or the permissions on a YouTube channel. So I figured, if there's any complications in a few weeks or months, that won't be a problem. I was very wrong about that. So at some point a couple of weeks ago, I decided that I was going to change the ownership of my YouTube channel from my old Google account to the new Google account, just to get my ducks in a row. And I figured, and at this point I had uploaded, I think 17 or 18 videos. A lot of work goes into that, as I'm sure any of you could appreciate. And when I did that, well, when I tried to do the change, I couldn't, because I would have had to have re-signed into the account. And Google would not allow me to re-sign into the account because it wanted to use two-factor authentication using a cell phone number, which I had not had access to in something like 14 months. So it then says, well, try another way. And trying the other way is to use your non-Google, your non-Gmail email address that's associated with the old account. I have access to that. I still have access to it. So I figured no problem. So I clicked the button and, send me the message to verify the account, and I received it. And I was able to go to the non-Gmail account that I still have access to. It was like, yeah, let's verify my Google account. Well, I got a message that I couldn't do that. Because apparently there are things like security questions and some other methods of verifying yourself, but I seem to have I have a different IP address on a different continent, and that wasn't good enough. I needed to prove that I had access to the phone number, which I no longer had access to. It was sending, some poor sucker in Philadelphia has received 6 text messages requesting them to enter a code number into Google to recover an account, which they can't. I realized that I was stuck in a loop. Now, I also made a request to do account recovery through Google, and it accepted that. And it said, hey, okay, you have to wait 30 days. And I thought, well, this is a pain, because I'm either going to continue 30 days while I still continue to create content that I might lose access to on top of the content I already created, or I may have to sign out of the account and not have access to the account for a month after I've built, 1,000 views, 20 subscribers. It's not a whole lot, but it was starting, and it looked like the algorithm was starting to get to know me and connect me to an audience. I was starting to get somewhere. They say make about 100 videos before you really know, before the algorithm really gets to know you and you're really in the swing of things. And I was only about 1/5 of the way there. And I figured, okay, 20 subscribers, it's growing. People are watching it. I'm getting positive feedback. Things seem to be working pretty well. I'm getting videos that are actually getting, 20, 30 views the first day they're out. And they're growing. The channel's growing. This is good. I don't necessarily want to stop doing that. So I tried to send a message to YouTube support, and it turns out that you're limited to 1,000 characters for that. It was very difficult. I had to do the Tonto and Frankenstein version of, what my problem was. Me have problem, account recovery. And that wasn't really working. So there was a snail mail address for Google, for YouTube. in Ireland. So I went to the post office and I sent a registered snail mail letter to the YouTube, it seems to be legal department in Ireland. And I said, here's who I am. And I gave a whole lot. I printed out a bunch of emails. It ended up being a thick packet of about 20 pages where I said, look, here's all the proof that I am who I am. Here's the original phone number, because we're showing a bunch of asterisks except for the last 2 digits. Here's the US phone number. Here's me. Hey, by the way, here's me paying you to port a phone number. Here's me with my previous associations with Google using this email address. I had some interaction with Google corporate for something entirely related. It just so happens, coincidentally, using this account specifically was created in order to speak with Google about that. Nobody else is going to have access to all this information. And I asked if I could do one of 3 things. Number one, I asked if we could just very simply give me access to the old account again, either by letting me answer recovery questions or just them snapping their fingers and doing it automatically. I gave them my new contact information, which I said, hey, I'm this other Google account over here, which I can verify. Please contact me that way. The other thing you could do, if you don't want to violate your policies doing the first thing, I understand that. Could you just take this one channel and you folks sort of manually switch it over to ownership of me over here? And the third thing that I requested is if you can't do number 1 and you can't do number 2, or you won't do number 1 and you won't do number 2, could you then just advise me, is it okay if I take down my content and I know I'm going to lose all of my subscribers and all of my watch hours and all that good stuff? And if I upload it over here, please tell me you're not going to hit me with some sort of copyright violation for my own material because it was on a different channel. So very quickly, in less than a week, I actually got an email at my new Gmail, at the one that I currently have access to, very polite, in which somebody at Google Legal really seemed like they tried to help. They said, hey, here's this this is the situation, and they forwarded it to the department, and I was CC'd on it, to the department that helps you out with that kind of thing. And they had a copy and paste response that was basically no. If you're familiar with Little Britain, the TV show, computer says no. It's basically what I got in a 5-paragraph copy and paste email. I responded to that. Thank you very much for taking the time to actually forward this to the right department. A lot of corporations wouldn't even bother doing that. I know I've talked to a lot of corporations about a lot of crappy stuff. And I got back the same copy and paste from the same department. They weren't reading the content of anything I said. It wasn't important. It didn't matter. So what I did was I took down all the content from the original channel. So that channel still exists. It has an owner. The owner is me. But the thing is, if I sign out, I believe I may be signed out of that account forever. So it's an account that was going to continue to get views and was going to continue to get subscribers. At some point, that laptop's going to die. That laptop that is signed in from the United States when I did 2-factor authentication with it 3 years ago plus, sooner or later, that laptop is going to die. Now, I had rebooted the computer any number of times. I had updated the OS. I had updated the browser any number of times. None of that had an impact on the fact that it recognized and kept me signed in with that YouTube account, with that Google account. So it recognizes the device. Sooner or later, the device dies. Devices always die. Sooner or later, that laptop's going to die. And the day it does, I would lose all contact and control over that account. If I set up anything that started earning any revenue, I would never have seen any of it at some point in the future when the laptop died. There was no recovering that Google account. So kind of stuck in that loop. I decided to fall on my sword earlier rather than later strategically. I just took down all of the content and I uploaded it, which was a real pain in the butt, onto the new channel, which has almost the same name, has the same logo, has the same me. Now it has the same content of everything except for the introduction video, which is now this reintroduction video. So that's where we are. So if you're a YouTuber or thinking of being a YouTuber, don't be me. Don't be Goofus. Be Gallant. What you want to do is make sure that you are signed in when you start creating content, that you are signed into a Google account that you have total control over and have total recovery level control over. Try signing out of the Google account that you're signed into YouTube with, and then signing back into it from scratch, maybe even from a different device. Maybe try signing in from sign out from a phone, sign in to a laptop, sign in from a device you haven't signed in before. Make sure that you can do 2FA with the Google account and sign out of it and get back into it before you ever upload any content. Or else you could be stuck in that loop that I was stuck in, and there's no good end to it. So, learn from my mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe a lot of you already knew this, and I'm the slow one. But now I've learned from my mistake, and I'm doing this on a channel that has 2FA enabled, and has lost all of its subscribers and all of its watch hours. So if you find me the least bit sympathetic, if you want to throw me a pity subscription, let's get this channel back and rolling. I want to continue doing this. I have 100 ideas for the work that I'd like to work on. I've been set back a couple of weeks. I've been set back about 10 days in terms of the work that I wanted to do on this channel. And I've been set back 2 months or more in terms of the algorithm alchemy and the subscribers and the watch hours that I had. It's extremely frustrating, but I'm gonna power through this, rise above, like Black Flag said, right? And that's where it is. That's the long and the short of it. So please hit like and subscribe. Tell a friend. If you know anybody, if this sounds like the kind of content you'd enjoy, please share. More the merrier. Tell me when I'm wrong. Tell me when I'm right. It's a conversation. Make response videos. All that good stuff. I encourage it. I love comments. I respond to comments, yeah, all that good stuff. So until next time, kids, this is Chris from Paisley, hoping that you keep on rocking in the unfree world.